Hey church, this is Daily Dose of Hope number 6. Wanted to reach out to you at the end of a week. And I know we're saying the end of the week, but in a weird way, all of the days are blending together, right? It's actually one of the beautiful things about gathering together on Sundays online is still trying to keep that day different than the rest of the days. But if you're anything like me, you're tired mentally. I found I haven't been sleeping as well. I think my mind is just going so much faster than normal. In trying to deal with crisis. And as I've said to you, sort of, say that carefully, because I know some of you are dealing with that very much firsthand, either with health issues or a loss of jobs, or trying to help family who are having health issues, or who are just in a more vulnerable place because of their age or because of health concerns. But it is, in a sense, a crisis that is globally we're aware of all the time, and then also just in our own world. And I was thinking about the fact that the fatigue comes from being in that kind of uncertain problem-solving mode and trying to think, okay, how do we respond to this? How do we respond to that? I had a phone call today with a couple of people just as we're working on some projects together, and they reminded me of something that I had heard actually a long time ago, but that someone else brought to mind recently in sort of coaching leaders through this. Is that referencing people who were prisoners of war and finding themselves in POW camps. That the ones who were optimistic and positive about the war ending soon or getting through it quickly were actually the ones that were not able to make it through. It was the ones who were more pessimistic that actually, who were more maybe sober-minded about how long this was going to be, who probably thought it was going to take longer than anyone was saying, and that things would probably get worse than people were saying. Now, as someone who has positivity as a strength, and that I tend to just sort of think, oh, everything will work out, that sort of bad news, it may mean I'm in trouble sooner than the rest of you. But it was just this caution to say, and I'm not a government official, I'm not a health official. And so we encourage you to continue to be tuned in to what our government and our health officials are telling us in terms of guidelines and things like that. But I think it is a good caution for us in this time to just say, okay, this may take longer than we think. This may persist longer than we think. The losses may get more significant than we realize. And it made me think of actually something Jen and I were talking about in the Dose of Hope earlier this week about grief. That one of the, the early stages of grief, both denial and negotiation. Well, this isn't so bad, or if we just do this, then things will turn around. And that can be where we sit in this, but actually moving towards what may be perceived more as a pessimistic or a glass is half empty kind of thing, actually is maybe moving towards what we called acceptance, of saying, okay, this is here to stay and it's here for a while. And we are praying and hoping that God intervenes and that things begin to turn around. But I would encourage you to say, okay, maybe in my own mind and in my own heart, and if I do share a home with people and a family, people I'm responsible for or living with, what does it mean to actually maybe have some more honest conversations and say, okay, it's been a couple weeks now. How are you feeling? What feelings come up for you if I tell you it's not going to be 2 more weeks, but it's going to be 2 more months, or it's going to be 4 more months, or 8 more months? And again, I'm not making projections. I'm just saying sometimes we can be afraid to have those what-if conversations. But those actually might be helpful in saying, okay, how do we get more honest with ourselves? How do we become maybe more in tune with reality and stare it in the face and say, okay, if this were to be the case, if this situation we were in were to persist, if these conditions stay for longer than we're hoping, if we lose our whole summer like this, if the restrictions from the government get even tighter, what does that mean? What does that mean for our well-being? What does that mean for how we talk about this? And the advice that we're hearing is that counterintuitively, that actually works to drop our level of anxiety and fear. Because the anxiety comes as we're constantly in this sort of crisis mode and sort of saying, okay, it is a crisis, but how do we move to sort of say, this is actually a new normal, that I can't actually live with adrenaline high for so long. I have to actually sort of settle in and begin to accept that this is my reality, that I need to begin to think more slowly and less reactively, to breathe more deeply, to actually have better rhythms. And so for many of you, that may mean you got to get out of your jammies now. You can't keep thinking, okay, I'll just keep sleeping in and this will go. Set an alarm. Some of the advice that people give about even just working from home or just even realizing taking this seriously is, I need a routine. I need to get up. And I remember reading a story of prisoners of war during World War II, who, in the conditions that were so adverse for them, whatever, they kept order. They had routines. They tried to shower. They tried to do things that they needed to. They made their beds. They kept the barracks clean where they were staying. They did everything they were supposed to do to maintain order. I was recently finished, after a long time, Nelson Mandela's biography. And one of the things I was so surprised at is he spent most of the time in the struggle and leading this sort of political movement that was trying to bring awareness to the systemic racism in South Africa. He spent most of that time leading it from prison. And when he got thrown into prison, he said, the struggle doesn't change. My role as a leader doesn't change. The environment changes, but we continue to lead on in the struggle. And so they organized themselves. They respected the authorities, even though they didn't agree with them, because they said, hey, we're trying to win them over for the long run. They held meetings. They found new ways to communicate. And so for some of us, it just means saying, okay, taking this seriously, saying, I can't just live in crisis mode or just kind of sleep in, stay in my jammies and not keep my regular rhythms. I need to actually set good routines to bring order and discipline and just good practices and new rhythms, new habits, knowing that we may need to form some new things that are going to be needed and to stay for a while. And so how do we continue on in that? And so I just want to encourage you to think that way, to realize that God is present in all of those things, that even when the children of Israel were wandering in the desert, many of you have hopefully been reading our blogs through Exodus, there was order. He was trying to bring order to them as they were a million people coming out of slavery that were wandering around in this aimless place and didn't know how long it was going to be there for. He still brought order and rhythm for how their lives were meant to be, how their worship life, how they were meant to treat each other and think through all of these things. And so my encouragement to you is to think through that. If you're on your own, to think through that, to journal, maybe to video call with some friends to see what they're doing that are helping, or as a family to figure out what is our new normal going to look like as we wait for God to do the things that only God can do, and as we do the things that are in our control to do. My hope is to continue to keep sending these out. I want to just to remind you to be gathering with us online this weekend at 10 a.m. with our live stream. And just know that I and the rest of our team are continuing to pray with you. We are here for you. And if you need anything, reach out. God bless.